You send a message, and it just sits there, delivered, maybe even seen, but no reply comes. No explanation, no closure, just silence. And in that silence, your mind starts filling in the blanks. Did I do something wrong? Are they mad at me? Did I say too much? Not enough. No second being ignored is one of the most quietly painful experiences a person can go through. Not because of what happens, but because of what doesn't. So today, we're going to look at why people ignore others, what's actually happening on the other side of that silence, and why it usually has very little to do with what you think. Let's start with something that might be hard to hear at first. Being ignored almost never means what your mind assumes it means. When someone goes quiet, without explanation, your brain doesn't sit calmly waiting for information. It immediately starts constructing a story. And because uncertainty feels so uncomfortable, that story is almost always worse than reality. But here's the truth most people don't expect. Ignoring someone is rarely a calculated decision. It's far more often an avoidance response, the same way some people avoid difficult conversations by staying silent in an argument. Many people avoid difficult situations altogether by simply disappearing from them. This isn't about you specifically being unworthy of a response. It's about the other person not knowing how to face the response they'd have to give. One of the most common reasons people ignore others is something surprisingly simple. They don't know what to say. If someone doesn't know how to explain their feelings, doesn't know how to say no, doesn't know how to admit they've changed their mind, or doesn't know how to have an uncomfortable conversation, silence often feels like the easiest way out. Not because it's kind, but because, to someone avoiding discomfort, it feels like the path of least resistance. There's another layer to this worth understanding. For some people, ignoring someone isn't really about that person at all. It's about managing their own overwhelm. If someone is dealing with stress, emotional exhaustion, or their own internal struggles, responding to messages, even simple ones, can start to feel like an overwhelming task. Not because they don't care, but because they simply don't have the emotional capacity in that moment. This doesn't excuse the impact it has on the person waiting for a response, but it does explain why silence sometimes has nothing to do with the relationship itself, and everything to do with what's happening internally for the other person. There's also a very different kind of ignoring worth naming separately. The kind used intentionally as a form of control or punishment. Sometimes silence is deliberate, used specifically to create anxiety, uncertainty, or a sense of powerlessness in the other person. This is different from avoidance. This is using silence as a tool. Learning to recognize the difference matters, because the response to each is very different. If someone is avoiding you out of their own discomfort or overwhelm, that reflects something about their capacity, not your worth. If someone is using silence deliberately to control or manipulate a situation, that's a pattern worth recognizing and protecting yourself from, not waiting out. There's a deeper psychological reason ignoring feels so painful to experience, no matter the cause behind it. Humans are wired for connection, and social exclusion, even in small forms, activates similar responses in the brain to physical pain. This is why being ignored doesn't just feel emotionally uncomfortable. It can genuinely feel distressing, even when, logically, you know it might not be personal. Understanding this can help explain why the silence itself often hurts more than whatever the actual issue turns out to be. Your brain isn't overreacting. It's responding the way it's designed to respond to social disconnection. So, what do you actually do with this information? If you're on the receiving end of being ignored, it's worth remembering that your mind's first explanation is rarely the most accurate one. Silence usually says more about the other person's capacity, avoidance, or internal struggle than it says about your value. That doesn't mean you have to wait indefinitely or accept being treated without basic respect. You're allowed to set a limit for yourself, deciding how long you'll wait and choosing to redirect your energy if that silence continues without explanation. If you recognize yourself as someone who tends to ignore others when things get uncomfortable, this pattern is worth gently examining too.